Good morning, everyone. Charlie Kirk is a right-wing talking head kind of guy. And he says, let me get this straight. Bill Gates, a software developer, is allowed a platform to discuss a vaccine. But actual doctors who have fought the virus on the front lines are censored when they talk about drugs they used to treat the virus. So that's, of course, the America's frontline doctors, and talking about the draconian censorship from Twitter and Facebook and all of the other top sites. You can still find the video on BitChute and other secondary sites, but it is notable that all of the main top line sites, you can find Bill Gates talking about how safe and effective vaccines are, but you can't find the American top doctors, American frontline doctors video talking about hydroxychloroquine and how it's effective with real patients. So that's notable because we live in Canada, we live in the internet that uses Facebook and Twitter and Google and YouTube. And because these tech platforms are censoring these things, this is potentially a way to start talking to anybody about how negative censorship really is. Like, it's not helpful to have billionaires who fund bodies like the WHO and other medical bodies have a bigger say than people on the front line who are treating actual patients, right? Why does Bill Gates get the platform and the actual doctors are silenced? Why is that okay with people who are supposedly driven by science and data? But again, the people who are treating the frontline patients don't have input into this. The people at the top who stand to make a lot of money from vaccines do get to have input into this on major platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and the rest. It seems not great. It doesn't seem free. It doesn't seem like freedom of speech is paramount. Not even in the United States, where it's supposed to be paramount. Sorry, I've got my garage door open, so people are starting their cars. It's a rainy Sunday morning. I'm going to leave it open, so I hope you don't mind, and I hope it doesn't take away too much from this. Hold on. It's hard to square those two things, right? It's hard to square the silencing of the frontline doctors and the boosting of people like Gates. Okay, moving into Canadian politics, or more hard Canadian politics. I think that still applies. Andrew Scheer says, no one is buying Justin Trudeau's latest excuse. The ethics commissioner is investigating, and we have written to the RCMP and the lobbying commissioner asking them to investigate. We will continue to hold Justin Trudeau to account. We will continue to hold Trudeau accountable as we keep fighting for the answers Canadians deserve. And this is a long statement. I'm not going to read it. Link is in the description if you want to read it. And it doesn't bode well when what's happened has happened. The non-criminal investigation of this has gone forward through the House, through the Finance Committee and the COVID Committee. And what's happened? We've been spotted taking lots of boxes out of their headquarters because no investigation, no freezing of documents, no reason not to take out their documents. They're their documents. They can do with them as they like. But at this point in this thing, any proving criminality, I think, will be, not necessarily difficult, but doesn't. I think that writing to the RCMP to initiate something now is basically all we're going to get out of it. I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of, oh yeah, you're right, let's go. Right? Oh, we missed this. We weren't watching the television. I just don't think that they missed it. I think that their response has been what we're witnessing. We're viewing it, right? And so this is trial by parliamentary committee, and it's got no teeth. It's just to shine a light on this. And like I said, Trudeau's plan basically is to aw shucks his way through it. I really meant well, and if he can convince enough Canadians that he really meant well, the rest of the opposition's a complete mess. The only party that Trudeau realistically has to worry about at this point in time is the Conservative Party of Canada, and their leadership race ends on August 21st, and the people who the front runners, according to the media who would know, according to the media-led polls, not the Twitter polls, is Peter MacKay, right? And Aaron O'Toole is, 23%? Peter MacKay's 55%. Looks like it's a MacKay lock. That makes Trudeau's position stronger. The NDP and the Greens are supporting him. So, and the Bloc is a wild card, but I think mostly support him. So what are you going to do? I don't know. There's no, where's the path? What's the path, right? You can't even have a conversation on Twitter about, about traditional images. My goodness. You see, go through the landmine that is my Twitter from the last 24 hours. It's quite funny. So it seems like there's a lot of the population that are quite happy with what Justin Trudeau is doing and are quite willing to completely turn a blind eye to the scandal here. Add to that, the scandal is getting more and more complicated as the time goes on. And I think Justin Trudeau's gone on vacation. Here's this tweet. Mr. Stash is saying, the rumor is 2 weeks on Vancouver Island. Rosie even mentioned it. I'm curious when they'll decide to admit it. And this is Miss Jackie saying Trudeau has gone on vacation. There's lots of speculation about where. And this is rumor, so be aware it's rumor. But it's interesting rumor. I think that probably it's about the right time. Like this is vacation time for Trudeau, right? So I don't know, maybe not. He's on a personal day and it said Gatineau. So instead of Ottawa, it usually says Ottawa. So I don't know. But here's an interesting tweet. Yesterday, I was talking about how we started work on May 5th, and they backdated the contract to May 5th. And there's some other documentation here. There's other stories that I think that possibly in my tabs here that mention May 5th as the date that we started work, and then they backdated it on the 22nd or something to that effect. But yesterday I was talking about the website. I want to help.org. And this reporter goes through saying iwanttohelp.org was purchased actually by a different organization in 2019 and then was used in some other marketing scheme, went not in 2019, before 2019, went dormant, was picked up by domain speculators and purchased by We in 2020, June 2020. And he says, we've got the documentation to prove it. This is a Namecheap receipt from We that has been produced by We that says they purchased it on June 2nd. And Namecheap, I use them too for my registrars, but you can do this. You can deal in, because if you purchase the domain and have it in Namecheap, then you can easily purchase and wheel and deal those pieces of property basically within Namecheap. So like this looks legit. Here's the whois record for iwanttohelp.org, right? You see that? It was registered in Panama, which I thought was strange that it's still like registrant country's Panama. So that seems like kind of odd, doesn't it? And so the rest of this, it's Cloudflare, so that's pretty standard with regards to all of this. I don't have the history of the hosting. I didn't log in or sign up or whatever for it, but it's very interesting because the timeline is played with a little bit. But this is what I mean by the things getting more complicated, right? Like even if you say, oh well, they started work beforehand and like they had the website on April 22nd, or they bought it in 2019, people are gonna. They're just chipping away at the story, right? Like now there's another angle that people can just argue back. And even if you believe that you're right, because you read the Toronto Sun article, right? And this is again about something different than the starting date, right? This is about the ownership of the iwanttohelp.org, but still, it's within that domain, and people aren't that discerning. People don't make the distinction that well, right? So it's like, well, you're talking about the website and they started on the 5th. That's not true. Oh, okay, blah, blah. You can conflate it, right? It's complicated, and that's the problem, right? So, man, it's very interesting. Good work by this guy, though. Like, he's pointing out that there's more minutia here than meets the eye, and still, closer to the facts makes the scandal more hard to understand. And adds another layer that can be used to wedge, right? So the easier the scandal, the more simple the scandal, the easier it is to communicate, the easier it is everybody agrees. Now it's like, oh, well, there's this part that nobody agrees on and this part that nobody agrees on. Here's another piece of We information. I don't have the government documents that are referenced in here. I was looking for them, but I don't have time this morning. So it says, people wonder how the Kielburger brothers, amassed $43 million in holdings between 2011 and 2017. The Wynne Liberals gave We charity on average $650,000 a year, according to government figures. In the year before the last election, 2017-18, that amount jumped to $1.5 million. That's interesting, right? That's interesting to note, where that money, that taxpayer money is going to those charities. Again, imagine that We is the Fraser Institute and Kathleen Wynne is a conservative premier, right? And he's giving We that money to go to schools and really whip up the youth. right? Like, think about that. Think about how that plays in the media. It doesn't play well, right? Conservatives could never do that. Never. They couldn't run that program. They couldn't fund that program. They wouldn't be able to well, the press would just eat them alive for it. They would. Okay, here's We Charity Controversy. Charity Intelligence Canada, and I've used these guys as references before. They're quite on the ball with these questions. They are an independent watchdog and on the nonprofit sector, and they've raised a lot of questions about We Charity and the government contract. And here's just one little bit of it. Here we go.
$543 million. It's a massive program. It was a massive part of the aid for students during COVID. Startling that when the Prime Minister said, stop everybody, let's make sure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed, let's do our due diligence. For 2 weeks, the government did its due diligence. And at the end of that, it didn't, as Katie Telford's testimony said, she was not aware that the contract was between the government of Canada and the Shell Foundation, We Charity Foundation, and not We Charity. So if you don't know who the...
One more complication, right? It's not even with We Charity. What is this? Wow, and you can't even have the rest of the conversation. It's very, it's so complicated. And I think people get this part of it. I think that people understand that the agreement that they said that only We Charity could deliver was actually delivered to We Charity Foundation, a real estate holding company. So that scandal, it's really easy to get on board with. Everybody's like, yeah, that's terrible. You can't do that. But instead of focusing on that kind of stuff, that's one question among many in this 5-minute or 8-minute interview. Well worth the watch, by the way. But there's people who are splitting it out to talk about all of the other associated things and seeing what sticks, seeing what people talk about, seeing what is controversial and how they can spin it. It's so interesting to watch, really. I mean, from a 30,000 feet view, it's very interesting. And even to watch the Twitter bots, so like accounts with like 10 followers, 5 followers, come and try and engage in arguments, right? And try and engage in all sorts of baiting and trying to get you to engage in an argument. And usually in an argument you're not rational, right? So you make mistakes, you say things that you wouldn't normally say, or you get angry at somebody, and like it's very interesting. Just wow. Here's moving into COVID. Here is a text message not sent to me, but it says, message from the government of Canada: download the COVID Alert app for free to help protect yourself and your community. The COVID Alert app lets users know if they have been exposed to COVID-19. Available now in Ontario. Yay, right? Here it is, the COVID-19 Alert today. And it doesn't, your privacy is protected. Please download our app. It says it has no way of knowing your location, your name or address, your phone's contacts, your health information, the health information of anyone you're near. So how it works: the app uses Bluetooth to exchange random codes with nearby phones. Every day it checks a list of random codes from people who tell the app they tested positive. If you've been near one of the codes in the past 14 days, you'll get a notification. So the thing with apps is they can potentially access basic information on your phone, but if they're on there and the terms of service change, or you grant them permissions, like the Facebook app will have mic permissions if you use it for phone calls, right? And then if you start searching for ladders or start talking about having to do outside repairs or something to that effect, you'll start getting images or ads for ladders, because your Facebook app, your Facebook Messenger app, is using your microphone to record your audio and then gearing the ads. And this is a feature. This isn't a bug. This is a feature. They're personalizing the ads for you to give you things that might be interesting to you because they're trying to help, right? I watched iRobot the other day, and I was like, that's scary. So anyway, if the permissions change, if the terms of service change while the app is on your phone, then the terms of service change and the app can start accessing all that information if it wants to, right? And I mean, TikTok's a big problem. It's harvesting information and sending it back to China. Any business that operates in China is also an outcropping of the Chinese intelligence, especially with data, and that's long been talked about. Project Sidewinder, 1997, talks about that. So this COVID app, I don't think is going to have a lot of adaptation, a lot of people downloading it. I could be really wrong. People with my opinion people who look at things in the same way I look at this would not download this app. But there are a lot of people who are buying the line that we should all be afraid, we should all be scared, and they're buying that this will keep them safe. And I think that all that this will do is further entrap them in their phone. It's not a good idea. It's not going to help solve any of the problems. Okay, moving into COVID in schools. COVID-19 is affecting the schools. And again, I'd love the criteria for mandatory masks. Mandatory masks are for grade 4 and up, which is wild. So what they're proposing to do, and I'll show this 26-second clip here, but what they're proposing to do is test all of the kids. And here's Susanna, and she says, so now you're declaring open season on children, test at any cost to their safety, test without parental consent or knowledge. That's not true. They ask for consent. Test which returns false positives, designed to shut down the household. Now, that is something that I'm concerned about. Here she is, same doctor. This is Dr. Yaf, and I think that's how you say that. And she's talking here about 50% false positive tests in populations with low COVID. Here, have a listen.
And in fact, if you're testing in a population that doesn't have very much COVID, you'll get false positives almost half the time. That is, the person actually doesn't have COVID, they have something else, they may have nothing. So it will just complicate the picture. On the other...
They may have nothing. They may have nothing? Okay. So from they may have nothing to here, well, here's this. This is testing in, if you find one case in a school, we're going to test the whole classroom. But didn't you say 50% false positives?
So to be safe, we take the whole classroom, including the teacher, the staff, and get them tested. And so one of the important things is having quick, reliable access to testing and getting testing done quickly and getting results. And if they were close contacts, the household, close friends, people they were around a lot, we would be asking them to stay at home. Possibly the whole class, depending on how close the class is.
What does that mean? Depending on how close the class is? What? Here's the news article about it. Basically, it says the same thing. Ontario health officials explain how schools will handle potential COVID-19 outbreaks. If they go to school and they develop symptoms while at school, the teachers and the staff will be trained on how to isolate the child quickly, notify the caregiver if it's a young child, and possibly test them if there's consent. So they are asking consent. In her recommendations, YAF also suggested a host of other scenarios in which a school could experience an outbreak and how best to identify and contain the spread of infection. If we have one case in a classroom and the classroom has cohorted, then we're looking at the people in the classroom, Yaf explained. For elementary school students, students will be with one cohort for the full day, and enhanced health and safety protocols will be put in place. Similarly, in secondary school, designated boards will open an adapted model with class cohorts of approximately 15 students. We take the whole classroom, including the teacher and staff, and get them tested. And if they, the source of the infection, were the close contacts, a household, a close friend, or people that they were around a lot, we would be asking them to stay home, possibly the whole class, depending on how close the class is. That's very poorly defined, in my opinion. Yaf said that if two cases were reported in the same classroom, the identification and containment strategy would be largely the same. However, if two cases are reported in separate classes, the first question would be, are they linked to each other, like Yaf said? They may be friends, they may be siblings in different grades, she said, while adding that the key would be determining if they were infected inside or outside the school. If we find they actually infected each other at the school, then we're looking at two classrooms and following them up. It would be extremely rare in consultation with public health that the whole school would need to be closed. Okay, so I still have very deep concerns about the prevalence of 50% false positive tests in populations with low COVID, and just mandatory testing of entire classrooms if they find one case. Seems really, strange, right? Seems like not a great choice. Here is Parks Canada. Parks Canada was created into a country in 1867. Now, there were evolutions of Canada, Upper Canada and Lower Canada, Western Canada, and within Upper Canada, they made slavery illegal in 1793. So before Canada became a country, Canada had outlawed slavery. We said, no, not so good. Not so good. Not to mention the British colonies outlawing as well. But here's Parks Canada saying between 1629 and 1834, approximately 4,000 people of African descent were enslaved across Canada. This left a legacy of discrimination and systemic racism that Black Canadians still feel today. Learn more about this shameful period in our history. Here's a quick part of our heritage, Parks Canada.
Pa should have been here by now. He's 3 hours late already.
Pa ain't gonna make it! One of them slave catchers got him. Something must have happened. I just know
Liza,
it.
you both made it past the border yesterday. We've all done this before.
He's our pa. He'll be here.
Come, let's pray.
No more prayers.
Liza!
Prayers.
Liza!
Between 1840 and 1860, more than 30,000 American slaves came secretly to Canada and freedom. They called it the Underground Railroad.
Lisa!
We're free. Yes, Pa, we're in Canada.
So I just think it's tone deaf for Parks Canada to publish nonsense like that. I think it's crazy. It's crazy. Here's Justin Trudeau talking about the same, and I think in light of the video we just watched, I'm just going to leave it there. It's virtue signaling, and it's divisive virtue signaling. It's not based in fact. It's ridiculous. So it is insulting to Canadians. Honestly, this government is insulting, and I've said that before. Here's Financial Post, last couple of stories for today, 21 minutes, okay. Ottawa to create EI-like benefit for gig contract workers as CERB winds down. I didn't think they were going to wind this down. I thought they were just going to roll it into some form of UBI. Anyway, the federal government plans to move as many out-of-work Canadians into the employment insurance system when a key emergency benefit runs out in the fall and provide an EI-like support for millions who can't qualify under existing rules. The change signals a potentially sweeping overhaul to the decades-old social safety nets criticized in recent years for not keeping up with modern labor force markets by increasing contract and gig work. Sorry about that. It was partly because of those holes that the government created an $80 billion Canada Emergency Response benefit at the start of the pandemic, which is set to wind down over the coming weeks. Those who already qualify for EI will be moved to that program. The government is promising a parallel transition benefit with EI-like components for those who can't yet, and I emphasize yet, said Employment Minister Carla Quattro, get into the EI system. It will include access to training and the ability to work more hours without having as steep a clawback in the benefit payments. The government, and that means the more so if you get $1,500 in benefits and you earn $1,000 and that balances, so you've got $2,500, and then if you earn $200 more, then the $200 comes off of your other thing, right? So you're never earning any more even though you're making more, right? It's a long trap. Anyway, sorry, back to this. Speaking Friday, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said the goal is to move everyone receiving CERB to employment insurance and cover anyone looking for work with a better 21st century EI system. Details will be rolled out in the coming weeks. The government's most recent CERB figures show $62.75 billion in benefits to 8.46 million people. About half of those recipients have gone to EI-eligible workers. Those eye-popping numbers were the reason the EI system was shelved in favor of the CERB in March, as federal officials worried the volume of claims would overwhelm the decades-old system. The government is still expecting millions to be on EI come the fall, about 4 million, Qualtrough said, adding that the system has been tested and was ready to handle the deluge upon its restart. We're going to move on to something different. The Liberals are hoping the changes prod more Canadians to either go back to work or look for a job as the economy moves into what the Bank of Canada has described as a recuperation period before a long, bumpy recovery. The recuperation appears to have started in May when the economy grew by 4.5%. Statistics Canada reported Friday, re-emerging from severe lockdowns in March and April. That figure beat expectations, and a further sign of optimism was a preliminary estimate of 5% growth in June, which will be finalized next month. The National Data Agency said rebounds in May were seen across multiple industries, including retail trade registered that saw its largest monthly increase since comparable readings began in 1961. Statistics Canada said economic activity still remained 15% below pre-pandemic levels despite the gains over May. So yeah, I mean, still things are a little dicey in the recovery, and there's businesses that aren't back to full capacity, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, it's interesting to note, and it's slow, right? And like, I don't know if it's artificially slow or if it's just slow because of the staged opening. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's impacting it exactly, but it's certainly a more sluggish recovery than we saw in 2008 after that crisis. And in 2008, we weathered that storm pretty well. And with this one, well, I mean, we will see when the tax bill comes in. We will see when the countermeasures start having to take effect. Because at this point, money's cheap and they're spending, right? And they're popular because they're spending. There's no consequences for their actions. So until the consequences catch up and Canadians feel it, things are going to be pretty much the way they are. So that's how things are. Here's the NHL, and I almost watched a game last night. My brother and my dad were excited about it, and I said, yeah, well, at least, they're not kneeling down. It's hard to do on skates. And I saw this, and I was like, well, guess I'm not watching that. And the point isn't that I disagree with ending racism. The point is that they're not talking about ending racism. They're not. They're using it as a way to enact other racist rules that prefer, well, I mean, it's from black only times on campuses and parks with black only times. This is a step backward. It's not a step forward. It's not helping. And I think it's divisive and not great. I noted it's not Black Lives Matter. The branding is not Black Lives Matter in the NHL. It's End Racism. And I mean, they've got Black Lives there, but it doesn't say Black Lives Matter. So, and there's no hashtag with Black Lives Matter. So I guess people pointing out that it's a Marxist organization got to them, being the NHL. But who knows? But here's Black Lives Matter because it's the spirit, right? And the whole anti-racism thing and that's all the same jargon, right? That's all the same language that's being used. And I mean, if they were really against racism, that would be one thing, but they're not. Here's what they're about. They're burning Bibles at the end of this, and they're burning American flags, and this is a chant. I'm going to turn it down a little bit because it's kind of loud. Yeah.
Lives matter! Black lives matter! Black lives matter! Black lives matter!
These are the people that these major corporations are saying, yes, these people are leading the way. They're burning Bibles and flags. Like, this is irresponsible. This isn't the people that I want being role models for my kids. This isn't the people that I want the role models kneeling down for. And what's with the kneeling? Seriously, people were slaves and they had to kneel, right? Like, kneel down, right? So the absence of respect for the national anthem is probably to stay in your chair, not to kneel down. Why are they doing such a submissive pose? It seems like a submissive pose. You're supposed to stand for your national anthem because, like, you're standing because you're proud of the nation and all that other stuff. If you're not proud of the nation, kneeling down just makes you look subservient, right? It really looks odd. It's a strange thing to do, to protest being subjected to slavery and claiming that you have been subservient, and then take on the kneeling pose. Why? Like, be aloof about it, right? Like, if you're gonna disrespect the national anthem, sit down on your chair, right? But kneeling, I don't get it. Maybe I'm totally out to lunch. I don't know, but it seems weird. It seems like a strange thing. Like, see how free I am? I'm gonna kneel down while the national anthem plays. It doesn't seem like like the protest makes sense. And this, like the burning of the flag and the burning of the Bibles, Marxist, right? Like, who else did that in recent history? Let's think about that. Is this the path we really want to go down? Is this the path that we want to consolidate and get behind? I don't know. I'm not going to be buying any NHL merchandise. I'm not going to be buying any live streams. I'm not going to be buying any virtual reality access to anything. This is garbage. This supports this, and I don't. And I think that's as direct a line as I can make. And man, look at the comments. Like, look at the Twitter comments. There are very few people who support this. People aren't going bravo NHL. They're saying, like, okay, well, I guess I won't watch hockey anymore. Like, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who watch hockey who look past this and watch away. But sorry, when you support this, that's not good. That's not acceptable in my mind. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingWasely.co. And have a wonderful, wonderful